directed. Score! Game 7! Montez St. Louis! We are going back to Tampa Bay! Lecavalier spinning. Lecavalier looking. Trying to drop it off. Brings it in himself. Left it in the middle. Shot! Score!
Welcome back to another episode of Thunderstruck. My name is Jake Ricker. I'm here with my good friend Michael. Michael, how you doing?
I'm good. You know, things are starting to look up. A lot of the sports leagues are starting to get back into the groove of things. We'll talk about that with the NHL, but overall, I have nothing really to complain about. Yourself?
I'm doing good as well. Yeah, I'm, in the same boat, still waiting everything to get back to normal. We're slowly getting there, but I'm getting, a little more excited as every day passes by as we get closer and closer to some return of some live sports, especially the NHL. So without further ado, let's get right into this. We got a couple things we want to talk about today. First being the Phase 2 of the return to play protocol by the NHL. It was officially announced. It actually has started at the time of this recording, which is June 8th. NHL clubs are now allowed to have small training camps going on. So a very exciting next step. We still have a long way to go until we get to actually, official games going on, but exciting nonetheless.
Definitely. And I am really excited to see hockey back. And it's really nice to see that hockey has been one of the major four sports that has taken the leap in terms of getting things back together, more so than the NBA, really. And the NBA was the major organization that was trying to get back to play as soon as possible. And now they have a plan, but the NHL is gotten their plan done faster. It seems like it's very detail oriented, and there are so many safety precautions in place that it really feels that they know what they're doing, which is good because Gary Bettman is a lawyer. So he probably went through every little minutia to make sure that, number one, the NHL was protected, but number two, the players are safe.
Yeah, absolutely. The NHL definitely is, making a little headway here in the world of sports, which is nice because, a lot of people will tell you, especially some radio influencers and whatnot, is that the NHL has a good product, but they've been terrible at marketing it. So this whole return to play protocol and how well it's gone so far, I don't want to jinx it, still early, is definitely a positive for them right now. So hopefully everything can continue to move. So for the official, what's going on, you mentioned, the testing and stuff that they're doing. So right now players can come back at a maximum of 6 players at one time to the rink or do any kind of training camp stuff, plus a limited number of club staff as well. And then I believe all of them have to be tested as well when going there. I know Sergachev posted on his Instagram story that he was headed to the arena and get tested and do some of his training camp stuff. So, and I believe that is all that's going on right now. But players are being tested, and it's only 6 per group. So that is what Phase 2 entails.
Yeah, I am really overjoyed, to be quite honest. Like, we'll talk about some of this stuff later, but just hearing the words hockey is back is just awesome. And it's going to be really different because we're not going to be allowed in the stadium. But even seeing Mikhail Sergachev post a picture in his gear got me really giddy. So I'm very excited to see how this is going to play out. The testing is probably going to be frequent, and it's not going to be just players. It's going to be arena staff. It's going to be people that are in broadcast booths. It's going to be coaches. But again, it's all to make sure that people are healthy and safe during what is still a pandemic, even though, the news has been a little more quiet about that recently. It's still a pandemic.
Right, absolutely. And speaking of getting excited and players posting things online, our one and only number one influencer, Alex Killorn, posted his own little video. His caption was, "The moment the NHL says you can skate again." And I'll tell you what. I mean, this has to be the best video of 2020. There's no doubt about it. I mean, it was just an amazing video. For those of you who don't know or may not have seen it, Kaloran posted a 2-minute video of him rallying up some of the Lightning players. They're all getting on jet skis and all had a couple of little fun skits, and they all ended up back at Amalie Arena with the video ending and saying the Bolts are back in small groups. So that was a lot of fun, and I think it got a lot of Lightning fans really, really excited for the season, even though we're still a decent ways away.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spoil anything in the video. I think it's definitely a watch, but there are a couple of like really classic moments. For instance, Coburn is in the middle of the Wild, and the only reason he knows the hockey's back is because Mikhail Sergachev has this noise that he makes while he's on the jet ski. Spoiler alert, if you don't know, Alex Kaloran is starting to ride jet skis all over the place for Doc Talk. If you don't know, if you're living under a rock.
Right.
But it's not the only thing. There, like Anthony Cirelli, there was this tiny little moment where he is trying to run towards the dock because he sees all the guys, and he tries putting the drinks on the table, but he throws them and they miss the table instead. Like, that little moment made me just cry laughing. And again, it was great to see all these people back. A lot of people look up to pro athletes, a lot of like younger kids. And I know for me, I was talking with my cousin who is like 5, and he is like, what is going on with sports? Like, why can't I see my favorite player? His favorite player is Mike Trout. Like, why can't I see Mike Trout? I was like, there's a lot going on, but this video definitely gave me hope that, you know, all the pro sports come back at some point.
Yeah, and it's really nice, too, for the NHL, for these players to be showing a little bit of a personality. This tweet did pretty well, had 31,000 likes with 11,000 retweets, a lot of people commenting about it. So it helped gain the NHL a little bit of attention and showed off these players' personalities, and was really, really, really exciting. So I can't wait. Everybody is very excited. We still got some ways to go. But if you haven't watched that video for whatever reason, you need to make sure that you drop what you're doing right now. I'm even allowing you to stop watching this podcast right now and go watch the video because it is awesome. Although I think it's something else we need to mention too, transitioning here, going away from the positives here for a second. Pittsburgh Penguins had released a statement that one of their players did test positive for COVID-19. Now, normally this is something that would be very concerning and something that could potentially almost shut down the whole NHL's return to play protocol. Luckily, though, player was, I don't believe, with the team. He was not in Pittsburgh, so he has been in isolation since he had symptoms. So luckily, I don't think this is going to be a major setback, but this is something that could potentially be very dangerous to the return to play protocol.
Yes, but I think that the public announcement of this definitely alerted NHL fans that this thing is still going on. And there are a lot of what ifs right now. Like, hey, what if a player during the play-in rounds or the playoffs tests positive for COVID-19? And I dare not think about that right now. I think with coaches, unfortunately, it's a little bit easier because you lock them in isolation. And they're still important, but, you know, they can probably phone into the bench area. With a player, they are directly impactful on the ice. So if they test positive, it's only going to be a nightmare, to be quite honest with you. And I think that's why the NHL has been so diligent in saying we're going to test players every single day, every single player, multiple times a day. So, I mean, they're taking all the right steps. I don't know what else they can do. And if COVID happens to strike again, then all you can do is shrug your shoulders and say, what's next?
Right. Yep. And that's why I mentioned, this is something that could potentially be detrimental to the return to play protocol because it could end the whole thing. And as you mentioned too, once we do start back up, it could, also end it at that point. But the one positive with this current situation in the Penguins is that we haven't gotten to the point. Well, this was before phase 2 started, so luckily this wasn't something where you could sit there and say, well, how many other players did he potentially infect here? That could shut down the NHL. So all the best wishes to this player that tested positive. Hopefully he can knock this out and get back into action soon enough. But that was some news I think it was important to look at. Let's talk about, though, the updated format, though. We had during the whole announcement of the return to play protocol, we now know how pretty much this is going to play out and how the playoff format will work. And there's a lot going on here, a lot to dissect. And personally, I'm pretty excited. What are your thoughts, Michael?
I got to agree with you. Like, this is extremely exciting. It's going to be a best of 7 now in the actual playoffs. All the rounds in the actual playoffs will be a best of 7, but the qualifying rounds, or the play-in rounds, as a lot of people are calling them, are going to be best of 5s. And for some teams, it might be really a pain because I look towards Winnipeg and Calgary. Maybe Winnipeg comes out blazing and David Rittich isn't ready, and Winnipeg destroys Calgary in 3 games. Or maybe they take a 2-0 lead, and that's insurmountable to Calgary. Calgary might have, like, a right to complain, hey, we weren't ready, and this should have been a best of 7. But on the other hand, I think it's great for the sport that there are, more media markets. They had to get those big 6 teams in there, or those original 6 teams in there, like Montreal and New York and Boston already made the playoffs, but just Chicago, those types. Too. Chicago didn't deserve to be in the playoffs, but here they are. I think it's great for the eyes being more on the NHL than normal. And again, this might be the best possible thing for the NHL, the first league to come up with a plan. And being the first league that might actually get into playing, which would divert all of the NBA and the NFL and MLB eyes to NHL and see that hockey is a great sport. Maybe it'll surpass other sports and become maybe a rock solid number 3 because, let's be honest, football and basketball are very hard to top.
Right, absolutely. And, I think you put it best there when you said this could be the best thing, right? This was the best case scenario, I think, for the NHL. When you're given a terrible situation, I think the NHL did a very good job of making the best of it. And to note the changes that were made, or the things we now know, is that one thing when this format first came out, one of the teams that voted against the format was the Lightning. And Alex Killorn had said that was because they were concerned that the top 4 teams were going to be rusty when the time came for them to play. But now what the NHL did to kind of fix that was there will be a round robin tournament for the top 4 teams that'll be going on while the play-in rounds are happening, or the qualifying rounds, whatever you want to call it. And this will hopefully eliminate some of that rust factor. And this also means, though, there will be reseeding. So the Lightning could potentially be the number 1 seed, or the number 4 seed, or the number 3 seed, or the number 2 seed. So we now don't know what seed they're going to end up being. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Maybe a team like Philly ends up as the number 1 seed, and it could be interesting to see if they have an easier road to the path to the cup now. And also, too, every round there will be reseeding. So there's no official bracket. You can still kind of make a bracket a little bit, but you don't know who you're going to be playing. Like, you can't look at the next round and say, okay, we're playing either this team or that team, because depending on what seeds win will determine who you play, because the top seed will always be playing the lowest seed. But I think that makes for some fun matchups too. And I think it's cool that the low seeds, like the Chicago Blackhawks, who are, don't have too much of a business being in this, will have to go through the tougher teams.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And the only teams that really don't change their seeding would be the number 12 teams in each conference, which would be Montreal and Chicago. Again, they made it in because you need original 6 teams to get that ad revenue and the TV revenue. But if they were to upset the number 5 seeds, which would be Pittsburgh and Edmonton, would move on to the actual playoffs, and they would automatically become seed number 8. So they're the only team that is really locked into their position other than the number 1 seeds in the conference, which is Boston and St. Louis, I think. So the rest of the matchups could really be, I think, kind of interesting and really fun, to be quite honest with you. Like, if the Lightning hold steady at number 2 or they move to number 3, let's say they move to number 3, they go 1-2 in their round robin, they would play Carolina. Like, I would love to see the Lightning and the Canes duke it out because I think Carolina is really good. I think they bolstered up their team during the trade deadline. And yeah, maybe they were lucky to make the playoff, but they are one of the better teams in the Eastern Conference. And as much as I'm a homer and I would love to see the Lightning breeze their way to the Cup Finals, I also am a huge hockey fan, and I would love to see the Lightning just go head to head with the best teams in each round, really earn their cup victory. And I think that, Carolina is a perfect team for that. And again, I would like to see the Battle of Florida. So if Florida decides to win and the Lightning match up with Florida, I would be cool with that too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of fun matchups. And I think that's the other thing that I think a lot of people are looking forward to with this format is that we're getting a lot of these potentially fun different matchups. Because, normally all the time we always have Washington and Pittsburgh playing each other, and then Toronto and Boston, which we still might get and are still all a lot of fun. We're going to get some different matchups here potentially, which I think people are looking forward to. Like the ones you mentioned, Lightning Panthers, that's Battle of Florida. That's a fun one. There's definitely a lot of fun potential matchups that we have here that people are excited for. Now here, I want to ask you about this because a lot of people have talked about how the NHL has been wanting to change their playoff format for a little while now. We all know a lot of people don't love the format. People will talk about how the top seed doesn't really benefit. They don't get a reward, if you will, for being the top seed. Is this something that we could potentially see the NHL move to permanently? Now, obviously, there would be some differences from this format, like if we finish the regular season normally, there wouldn't be a need for the top 4 seeds to be reseeding. They wouldn't do a round robin tournament. They would have an actual bye. And there's a couple other little differences. But do you think this is something that potentially the NHL could switch to? I think it is. I think it's something that could be a lot of fun and could be a huge boost for the NHL.
Going to my preferred playoff bracket or playoff type seeding, I'd have to look at the NBA and the way that they do things. So the NBA's got divisions. The divisions, to be quite honest, don't really mean anything. For the playoffs, they are set 1 through 8 for the conference. That's what I want to see in the NHL. I want to see, and we're going to see this after the play-in round, if all the teams end up moving on that are the higher seeds, which won't happen. But let's say it does. All the higher seeds move on. In that case, we would have 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, 4 versus 5. That's the way it should be. None of this highest seed gets lowest wild card. Second highest seed, but in another division, gets the second lowest wild card. 2 and 3 play each other. Like, again, we've gotten good ratings out of that. Like, Toronto-Boston is a favorite. Washington-Pittsburgh is a favorite, like you've said before. However, let's say that we go forward in this particular bracket with 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7. If Pittsburgh beats Montreal and Philadelphia goes 0-3, we get Pittsburgh versus Philadelphia, Battle of Pennsylvania, which is, for all intents and purposes, one of the best series in the NHL, right behind the Battle of Alberta. In that sense, doing things the normal way can always get you the best results. I don't understand why the NHL is constantly getting in their own way when it comes to the playoff bracket. And I think this is a nice first step into going back to the way that things used to be. But I'm not a fan of the way that things are now. And if I had to pick a substitute, it would definitely be, hey, just go straight 1 versus 8. And if you need a tiebreaker, go to division standings, see who did what.
Right. Yeah, this is definitely, I think, what a lot of people want to see. But let me ask you this. The NHL took this exact format that we have now with a qualifying round or a wild card, so to speak, and then the top 4 teams secured a quote bye, and you had reseeding every round. Is this a format you think you would like? Because I think for me personally, I think even just this format right here would be a lot of fun because you would see a benefit for the higher seed teams because they technically get to play the lower seed teams who are supposed to be not as good. So you have that little bonus of being a higher seeded team. You get different and fun matchups all the time, and you get a wild card playing round, which a lot of sports have. So I think for me, for the most part, I'd love to see this, obviously without the 1-4 reseeding thing, because we're only doing that because of how the regular season ended. But even if you took off, to make this happen, you might say, okay, we'll play 10 less games in the regular season, and then we'll have these qualifying rounds. What do you think of this format specifically if they move forward with this?
I'll be honest, I don't love it because the sort of draw into the playoffs is you worked 82 games to be one of the top 16 teams, even with the terrible playoff bracket they have now. Most of the time, and this didn't happen last year when Montreal had 96 points and didn't qualify for the playoffs, but most of the time, you have the top 16 teams in the playoffs, regardless of seeding. If you were to expand it to 24, you're basically telling all of the teams, hey, don't suck. Like, Chicago was bad. Montreal was not very good. Buffalo was horrible and was somehow 3 points out of a playoff spot with 2 games in hand, which a lot of people in Buffalo are upset about. They're like, oh, we didn't make the playoffs. Do you want to make the playoffs in this state? Like, do you want to make the playoffs like this? They would have gotten destroyed.
That's true. Yeah,
if you're one of the top 16 teams, you have the sense of pride. Hey, we worked for this. We made the playoffs. If you're one of the top 24 teams out of 31 teams, soon to be 32, you're like, hey, we did okay. We finished around 500. We made the play-in.
Mm-hmm. That's a fair point. So let me just say this then. Okay, so what if we forget the qualifying round then? Do you like? I know you like the 1 through 8, which I do too. How do you feel about the reseeding every round?
I don't love it either. It makes sense. It makes more sense than the other stuff. If you want the best teams to make it, you will, put them against the worst teams. That makes sense to me. But at the same time, if you are Columbus and you upset the Lightning last year, and I hate bringing up this example because it gives me PTSD. But if you're Columbus and you upset the Lightning last year, then you want to face a sort of a worse team. You want to face a worse team. So that makes sense in terms of the best teams playing the worst teams in every round until you get to the conference finals. But at the same time, if a team that barely squeaks in does upset a major player, then yeah, they should be rewarded by playing a worse team.
Make some good points. I think personally for me, I like the reseeding because I just like seeing teams that, end up earning that spot, have that chance at, always playing the lower seed. I think you get a lot of fun matchups with that. And it also some people have talked about how you can't technically prepare for exactly, there's a lot of different teams you could end up playing. Not so much the later rounds, but so it's a little bit harder for video coaches to prepare. First up, they're going to look at a lot more video. But I digress. I think for me personally, I'm a fan of it. It will be interesting to see, though, how this all plays out, if the NHL will keep any part of this format, if they'll keep the reseeding, if they'll keep just the 1 through 8 conference format and then go back to a regular bracket. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they keep. I think, like we've mentioned here, I think we agree the 1 through 8 is the ideal thing, that the one thing that if they keep anything from this format, it's that, correct?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. But we'll see. We'll see if they keep anything else too. But either way, it's exciting. I do like this format for what the situation is, and hopefully we get there sooner than later. But let's move on now. Let's talk about the NHL 2020 draft lottery, because this is going to be a doozy. I don't want to get too much into it because it's very, very confusing. But the NHL did outline how the NHL draft lottery will work. Now, Michael, I'm going to let you try to explain it the most here in a second, because I think you understand a little bit better than me. But basically, we have the potential to have 2 draft lotteries. If one of the teams, 1 through 7 of the worst teams, which is Detroit, Ottawa, San Jose, but Ottawa has San Jose's draft pick, the Kings, the Ducks, the Devils, and the Sabres. And then 8 through 15 is labeled as Team A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. And if one of the A through H teams, those are placeholder teams for the teams that are going to be losing in the qualifying round, if one of them wins a top 3 draft pick, which is what the first draft lottery will be, then we will have to have a second draft lottery. Now, if all 3 of them are won by the 1 through 7 or 8 through 15, then we don't have to have a second one. But, it's complicated. It is a plan.
Yeah, and you talked about it really well. I don't think there's anything I really need to explain as much. But you're right. If there is one of the 3 teams that is currently in the play-in rounds, if they end up winning a draft lottery, then there will be a second draft lottery. I believe it will be just that pick, though, and it will be cycled through once all the teams are eliminated to see who gets that based on points percentage, Team A, Team B, Team C, all that stuff.
Right.
The thing that I'm really fascinated by is all of the picks that were traded away by teams that aren't in the top 4 for either side, either conference. So they actually have an opportunity to still be in the lottery. So just running down the list of each side, in the Eastern Conference, Toronto traded away their first round pick to Carolina. It's top 10 protected. It's number 11. If it's number 12, Carolina gets the pick. Carolina gave their pick to the Rangers. So if Carolina gets eliminated, I don't think that had any protections. I could be wrong, but I don't think that had any protections. The New York Rangers could win the Stanley Cup theoretically and get the first overall pick. Pittsburgh traded away their first round pick to Minnesota. So if the Pittsburgh Penguins get eliminated and Minnesota advances, Minnesota could technically go all the way, win the Stanley Cup, and get the first overall pick. And the Islanders traded away their pick. I believe that's lottery protected, but they gave it away for J.G. Pageau. In the Western Conference, the Canucks trade that resulted in the Lightning getting Blake Coleman gave the Devils the Canucks pick, but that pick is lottery protected. The Oilers somehow didn't give away their first round pick. I don't think the Predators did as well. And I don't think Winnipeg or Calgary did either. So it's more so in the Eastern Conference than it is the Western Conference about which teams could theoretically have their pick given away if they were to lose in the qualifying round. And then for all the other teams that still have their first round pick, unfortunately, if they were to get eliminated in the qualifying round, they don't have an opportunity to challenge for the cup. Fortunately for them, if they get one of the top 3 picks, they'll have a top 3 pick if they win the lottery. So they get someone like, I doubt they get Lafreniere. I doubt they get Quentin Byfield, although he may drop to number 3. But, they could get someone like Tim Stützle, hope I pronounced that right, or Cole Perfetti, or Alexander Holtz, or Lucas Raymond, or all of these honestly pretty good talents. Like, this is a really good draft. So if you don't win the cup, if you get eliminated in the qualifying round, hey, that sucks. But at the same time, you're getting a really good talent.
Yeah, it's very true. And a top 3 pick is a top 3 pick. Obviously, that's a huge plus for teams. So it'll be interesting to see how this draft lottery works out and if we're going to have that second one. And, I think it would be kind of funny or what a headline it would be if one of these teams is somehow able to pull off the Stanley Cup champions and the first overall pick. But, unlikely, would be interesting to see. So the first lottery is on June 26th, which is, a couple weeks away, but we're getting there. So, that'll probably be here before you know it. So that's when the first one takes place. The second one doesn't have a date if it needs to happen. 2 more things that we're going to talk about before we end this episode. The Ottawa Senators GM was making headline. And Michael, I'll let you talk about this real quick.
So just a minor correction. It's not the GM, it's the owner.
Because,
of course, Eugene Melnyk was making headlines. He hasn't been able to stay out of the headlines. But recently, the Ottawa Senators severed ties with the Sens Foundation, which is their charity organizations, after 22 years. And it really is extremely messy, the situation in general. There is claims that the charity has raised over $1 million, but has spent less than half of it on the cause on the causes it was supposed to support. But at the same time, considering we're in the middle of a pandemic and all of these causes that the Sens Foundation might be able to help with are no longer going to get help, it is a really bad look for the Senators. And it's just another thing where I'm baffled that Eugene Melnyk owns a sports team. So Eugene Melnyk, owner of the Senators, he took $1 million of charitable contributions to the Sens Foundation, which they've now split up from, by the way, and spent $5,000 on programs. He also charges rent for his own team's charitable foundation, which is no longer a thing, but he did charge rent for his own charitable foundation. It is mind-boggling to me. No other owner in sports does this. But again, this is a messy situation. I thought I'd lay things out for you. That's all I'm going to say about it.
Yeah, it's definitely poor timing, and it's not a good look. I don't know. It hopefully things can get worked out and hopefully get better for the Senators team one day. But like you said, it's very poor timing right now, and just it is baffling. It's like how is it continually messed up this bad all the time? But hopefully we do see some things start to work out better for that organization in the near future. But one more thing we do want to mention too real quick. There was a comment on ESPN recently. I can't remember who said it. Michael, if you remember his name, who was it?
Max Kellerman of First Take.
Right. And he mentioned that he believes the NHL is not one of the top 4 major sports. And that sparked a large conversation, let's call it, in social media, just in general. So I don't want to say too much because I know we're all biased, but I think this is something going back to how we were talking about how the NHL current format and them getting back as one of the first to potentially get back here can really make a mark on the world of sports and say, hey, we are one of the top 4 major sports.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, I'm not going to say anything that's too controversial because, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We have better things to worry about. But Max Kellerman is great at analyzing boxing. He's one of the best people I've ever seen in terms of, talking about strategy and all those things when it comes to boxing. But ever since he got into First Take, I think he's been clowned a lot for his sports takes. And some of them have been right, some of them have been wrong. In this case, I think he stepped a little too far over the line because he was talking about other sports that, again, not to sound biased, don't really sound like top 4 sports. And to be quite honest, I'm a huge baseball fan. And I think the NHL, with the way that they're going in trending in an upward direction and MLB spiraling out of control, might lock the NHL into a solid number 3 seed, as I was talking about earlier. Again, I don't think football and basketball are going to be touched. But this past couple of months has really given me hope for the NHL in terms of becoming a solid American sport.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely hope that that's the case. I've seen a lot of people talk about how, when you're on a show like that, First Take, it's obviously called First Take for a reason. When you put figureheads on a show like that, your goal is to get comments like this that spark a conversation and have a large reaction. So this is what ESPN wants from these kinds of shows. And I think in a couple senses, he's not completely wrong. There are scenarios like if you look at strictly viewing numbers, there are sports like, for example, in America, college football is huge and could technically be considered one of the 4 major sports. It's a whole nother debate. But my point being, there are certain things you could look at and say, yeah, well, maybe he is right. But I think for most people overall, this was something that they were like, well, I mean, hold on a second now. When we talk about the 4 major sports, hockey's always been considered one. How on earth do you not consider hockey one of the 4 major sports? But the only thing I can take from this, and this is the last thing I'll say, is that I hope, with that and with the new format they've got here and this return to play protocol, is that the NHL can have a successful return and put their mark on the world of sports and become a rock solid, let's say, top 4 major sports in the world. So I'm excited for the return. We're getting close. It's going to be a fun one. So Michael, do you have anything else to add?
No, I wish ESPN covered hockey a little bit more, but that's a topic for another day.
Don't we all?
I'm very happy that hockey is on its way back, and it's been a really long time, and it's only felt like a month or 2 months or 3 months, but it's felt like a year, or like it's felt like a long time as someone that's invested in sports pretty heavily. But at the end of the day, this break allowed me to do some other things, which isn't to say that sports isn't an essential, because I believe it is, to at least my life. It gives me something to talk about on a daily basis.
I'm with you.
But I don't know. This break gave me a lot of time to do other things that I've really been passionate about. And now I'm really ready for sports to come back.
Absolutely. Well, that's all we got for you guys today. I hope you enjoyed listening. Be sure to follow us over on Twitter at Babe Bolt so you can check out these podcasts, live coverage when games do finally return. And make sure for everybody who's been enjoying our fan favorite player bracket to continue voting in those polls. I know I am, and Michael, I know you are having a ton of fun with it too. So please continue to vote in those polls. If you guys have any other questions for future podcasts, be sure to let us know, and we'll talk to you guys next time.